An angry Iraqi government says it's determined to appeal a controversial court ruling in the US that dismissed manslaughter charges against Blackwater security guards. But how can this case now move to an appeal? And what's the fallout of the ruling for the US Iraqi relationship? This is Inside Story. Hello and welcome to the programme. I'm Sahil Rahman. Iraq is resolved to seek justice for its people. On Friday, the Iraqi government threatened to sue the American security firm Blackwater, now known as Z Services. Now, this after manslaughter charges against 5 of its guards were dismissed. They're accused of killing 17 Iraqi civilians in 2007. The security personnel claimed to have fired in self-defence when a convoy they were protecting came under attack. Witnesses, however, say the men opened fire without provocation indiscriminately into a crowd. On Thursday, a US federal judge dismissed the charges against the guards, citing a breach of their rights. In an exclusive interview with Al Jazeera, alDabbagh, the Iraqi government spokesman, called the ruling unacceptable and said Iraq will seek other ways to prosecute the men.
We are sorry that the federal judge had that verdict. We keep them and we hold them criminals. As per our investigation here in Baghdad, the Blackwater personnel, those 5 people, they had used excessive force and they didn't follow the rule of engagement, and they had killed innocent Iraqi on 16th of September 2007, and we reserve the right of our victims, Iraqis, and all the citizens which has been harmed during this criminal act. We reserve the right to follow and to bring them to the justice, either through the American justice system or through the strategic agreement which we had with the United States, which keep the reserve of our citizens for all the military operation, all the victims of military operations.
Well, joining me today to discuss this further, from Baghdad, we have Maliki. He's a member of the Iraqi Parliament. In London, Sabah Al-Mokhtar, the president of the Arab Lawyers Association in the United Kingdom. And here in Doha, we're joined by Todd Kent, Assistant Professor of Political Science at Texas A&M University. Gentlemen, welcome to Inside Story. Mr. Maliki in Baghdad, can I come to you first, sir? The initial reaction from the Iraqi government was to condemn the ruling, and they say that they will seek justice by other means, as we've just heard. How do you expect the government to proceed now?
We were severely astonished about this decision here in Iraq in general, and really that's something related to the holiness of Iraqi blood and even Iraqi sovereignty. So the atmosphere here in Iraq is very reactive. I mean, the street is talking, the victims, their families, and the parliament today, it was a very really reactive meeting, and a lot of parliamentarians spoke severely, and they blamed the government because they said that the public prosecutor should be there in the United States to defend Iraqis and to present their defense there. Anyhow, and even the parliament in general, I think there might be a decision to urge the Iraqi government to follow up the case with the United States Embassy in Baghdad and human rights organizations, and to go to the Ministry of Justice in the United States and try to take the rights of the victims and also revise the punishment. I mean, the trial of those criminals, and try to activate the agreement between Iraq and United States, and what Dr. alDabbagh, the Iraqi representative government, said. that in the agreement there's something like that. So we have to follow it, and we have to take the rights of the victims and to have to punish the criminals.
Sure. We'll come to the agreement in a moment. And I think you've touched on a wide range of issues there. Let's just focus still back on the Parliament. And Sabra Al-Mokhtar, let's come back to what we think or how the Iraqi government could proceed legally with respect to the U.S. security pact that has been signed between the two countries and generally the relationship as well between the U.S. and Iraq.
Well, I'm amazed at the attitude of the Iraqi government. It shows surprise. This is a crime which cannot be allowed to go this way, because the idea any self-respecting society would not allow a technicality to stand in the way of justice. Those men have killed a number of people. There are witnesses. There is an American judge who came to Baghdad and he took the statements, he found the facts, but then the judge, on technicalities, he thought that the case should be thrown out. I think the government of Iraq should take steps that, number one, it should ban this company under whatever its name from working into Iraq. It should, since it is in Iraq, it is under the Iraqi jurisdiction. The pretense that there is something to do with the defense treaty, this action or this act has taken place before this agreement was signed with the Iraqi government. Law number 17, which Bremer has given immunity to the American forces as well as the contractors who are working with the CPA, is no longer applicable. So those people, since the Americans have handed sovereignty, as they call it, the Americans cannot play the role of both being an occupying force or a force which is at the presence of the Iraqi government. Sure. Under the Geneva Convention, the U.S. is responsible. Under the Iraqi law, the U.S. is responsible because this is a contractor of the USA, of the U.S. Army, and it is under the rules of law, both in the U.S. and in Iraq. The U.S. government is personally, it's responsible under the vicarious liability.
Todd Kent, can I bring you in here? You've heard what our guests in both Baghdad and in London have said, and there is this issue about the responsibility of the US. And since the pact, the US Iraqi security pact, was signed in the November of 2008, came into operation on the 1st of January 2009, incidents like this have been reduced. But that's also because we've seen US soldiers and certainly a lot of defence contractors taken off the streets of Baghdad since June of 2009. What avenues are left, as far as to your understanding, for the Iraqis, considering this particular legal door has closed?
Well, certainly a couple quick items. First of all, there's different rules now than there were before January 1st, 2009. And, the road open to Iraqis and the families of the victims is certainly to sue Blackwater or even the individuals in civil court within the United States. And let me make a statement here. Several of our presenters have mentioned the word technicality. This is really not a technicality in U.S. Jurisprudence. In U.S., you're protected against self-incrimination. And so what the judge ruled was that the prosecutors were overzealous and presented evidence that they couldn't present. So there was an attempt to prosecute. They violated their own rules. So it was not a technicality. This is a key, standard of U.S. jurisprudence, that you can't incriminate yourself. Now, that doesn't make it any easier for the victims or their families, but it's certainly not. It was a ruling made within U.S. Court, the laws of U.S. courts.
Sabra Al-Mokhtar, you're nodding your head in disagreement, sir. Would you like to come in here?
Yeah, of course, that's not correct. The rules on self-incriminating and the evidence, it's not an American thing. It's in America, in the UK, in Iraq, everywhere it is the same rule. At this present moment, this judge decided that because those people have been pressurized to give statement, despite the fact that one other person have actually made an admission, and he is not sentenced yet. So you have an American judge who went there, he saw the site, he saw the evidence, he saw the witnesses, and he came to the conclusion that there is prima facie case against those people, and you have one of their members admitting liability. This is purely a technical. I have no problem with technicalities, but you cannot, any self-respecting society would not let technicalities stand in the face or in the situation of justice.
But it actually has happened. It has. Sorry, yes, coming Ted Conte. I was going to say it actually has happened, hasn't it, Mr. Kent?
Yeah, no, certainly other societies don't allow for self-incriminating in their court system. I'm not implying that. What I'm saying is when a prosecutor asks for grants immunity to somebody for their statement and then tries to use that in court, that is self-incrimination. It's against U.S. law. So even though people may deem that unfair to the final situation, it is against U.S. law, Amendment 5 of the Constitution. Now, that doesn't make it any easier for anybody. They may not like the outcome, but that is the rules within the U.S.
And Todd, if we can just also mention the fact that it has been widely said as well, both in the U.S. and in Iraq, that even U.S. citizens are not happy with this particular decision, especially the commander of U.S. forces in Iraq.
Well, the commander of the U.S. forces said that he is grieved that individual citizens and innocent civilians died, but that is the rule of law in the United States. And we see that within the court system. Sometimes people, there's not a verdict a verdict comes forth that you don't like, but that's the system within the U.S.
Mr. Al-Mokhtar,
so the destruction of Fallujah at the time, because
is there an option now for a civil case?
Oh, certainly. In fact, civil cases have already been filed in the courts in Virginia. Iraqis have filed civil cases against Blackwater, against the individuals involved, and that's certainly an avenue open. It's not a criminal case anymore, and nobody would go to jail, but certainly there would be damages awarded if they were to win. And you've seen that very often in the U.S. When they don't get the results you like in a criminal court, the civil courts are open to you.
Sabah Al-Mokhtar, do you think that that is an avenue?
Well, certainly it is an avenue which the U.S. government itself should pursue. We must remember that the American government destroyed Fallujah because 4 of the Blackwater people were killed at the time in Fallujah, and they were hanged and burnt and what have you. We have to remember also that the U.S. is responsible for protecting the civilians in Iraq under the Geneva Convention. So it has a responsibility that it should take whatever action, be it civil or criminal. And indeed, I think the criminal one is not shut yet. I think the American administration has to pursue the matter to overturn this judgment, because this judgment, no self-respecting society would accept it. And this is not a matter of technicality and law alone. There is justice. It has to be seen to be done. The U.S. has a duty both under American law, under international law, as well as its moral duty. This action should be continued, and the American government itself should pursue a civil action in addition to that action that the personnel, the people who are who've lost their loved ones should pursue there, but it should be the American government, because it has a duty under the international law.
Okay, one appreciates that, Mr. Mokhtar, and I think that sentiment is certainly echoed in Iraq. Al-Mokhtar, if the government themselves pursue this, and they will be pushing the Americans hard, as we've heard. At the moment, they are fine words, and we all appreciate that, sir. But the practical solutions are either a civil case or extradition. And is there an extradition treaty or agreement between the US and Iraq? And what would actually satisfy Iraqi people if they can't get a criminal conviction? Would a civil conviction be enough?
As a matter of fact, this issue has 3 aspects. First, political aspect, and secondly, a human aspect, and thirdly is the legal aspect, which my friend discussing. If we take the political aspect, here the Iraqi street and the Iraqi parliament and all the political parties, political blocs and groups, they are speaking in a reactive way. So that unified all the political current in Iraq against the United States and United States justice. And this is, a critical political problem. Now we are coming to elections, and the United States going to withdraw, and the people the security is disturbed. That will create a good reaction to criminals, to terrorists in Iraq, to be encouraged to do more and more of disturbing security, because they would said, look, those Americans are unjust, they are oppressive, they are everything. They are bad in their behavior and no rights to Iraqis. So this is one. Secondly, from human aspect, really we are inviting all the human rights organizations, Human Rights Watch, the Ministry of Human Rights in Iraq, having a great invitation for all worldwide organizations to stand in a solid state against this bad behavior of the American justice. And thirdly, the legal aspect, that those victims should be, first of all, satisfied. The victims should be compensated well. And here there is a critical issue. Should they be tried on Iraqi laws or American laws? If we take both laws, as my friend said, they will be they will be found guilty. So people here, they will, I think, press to form demonstrations, something like that, for invitation of trial under Iraqi laws, which the agreement, Iraqi-United States agreement, denote. So I think this will stimulate disturbance, general disturbance in the political field in Iraq. So there might be sympathy, obvious sympathy from the United States government, obvious sympathy from the United States Congress. That's at least they sympathize with the victims and with Iraqi people, and also returning back the rights of the victims to compensate them well.
Well, I'll take on board all of those 3 points in a moment, because with Todd Kent, because it does reflect what I want to move on to, because there have been several other cases against American security personnel as well as the army. 11 soldiers were convicted for the Abu Ghraib scandal of 2004. It's very well known. They were accused of subjecting Iraqi detainees to severe physical, psychological and sexual abuse. 8 Marines were charged in the 2005 Haditha killings, which claimed 24 Iraqi men, women and children, all unarmed civilians. 5 other soldiers were charged for gang raping a 14-year-old girl, killing her and her family in the town of Al-Mokhtar in 2006. Todd Kent, you know, there is this whole perception, isn't there, that it doesn't really matter whether it's security contractors or the American military, that before this pact was signed, it seemed that the Americans could get away with it. And so there's a greater call for justice, and therefore can you see what Mr. Al-Maliki was saying, that the opposition parties in Iraq could certainly use this to their advantage, especially with an election coming up?
Well, certainly, and I think that the key point here is that there has been a lot of innocent killing in Iraq over the last 5 years. This is a symbolic event, and I think that's why those that are opposed to the government, those that are opposed to the U.S. presence, will certainly use it symbolically to say that this is symbolic of everything that has gone on. So it's really, you see a lot of outcry for domestic political consumption. It doesn't mean that the emotions don't run high. It's not an important event, but certainly I think that the opponents use this as a symbolic event, that this is representative of much more than this one event.
How emotional, if that's the right word to use, is this sort of a case in the United States in terms of the perception that the public have when they hear about cases like this?
Well, certainly, if you know that, like Abu Ghraib, who you mentioned earlier, certainly there was, the majority of Americans were disturbed and upset, and certainly this situation disturbs Americans. I think one thing that it's hard for maybe others to understand is that there also is a deep respect for the fact that even the accused get their day in court, and that's certainly the prosecutors have to have the evidence, and they didn't follow the rules, and this was thrown out. So I think it would be a mistake to think that Americans aren't upset about some of these atrocities.
Sabah Al-Mokhtar, I mean, it does mean that, as we say, Iraq is heading towards a general election. Both Iraq and the United States seem to have a symbiotic relationship. They need each other, don't they, at the moment? Is this type of incident, i.e. this court case, is this something that could fracture it slightly, pull it apart? I mean, how would you describe this particular situation in terms of the relationship?
Well, in the first instance, I totally disagree with Mr. Kent about the caring of the Americans, of the Iraqis, because there is zero caring. Otherwise, the U.S. would not do what it's doing, whether it's the war or the occupation or the killing, or not trying anybody or not finding anybody guilty. The U.S. has showed total disregard to the Iraqis. And this actually puts the Americans, the morality and the ethics of that nation into question. But let's assume that this is correct, that they do care. If they do care, then there is action to be taken. As far as the consequences on the relations of the Iraqis and the Americans, I think when, at the end of the day, in a couple of years' time, when the government in Iraq, the Maliki government, is pushed to choose between the Americans and the Iranians, they're going to choose the Iranians. And I think it is about time for Maliki, even for his election campaign, to actually show a tougher hand on the Americans and insist that those people are brought to trial, are found, proper trials are held, and people are held accountable for the crimes they have committed. The U.S. have so far let everybody immune from the very few exceptions where people have paid for the crimes they have committed. Therefore, I think the relations between the government in Iraq, in Baghdad, and the U.S. government is anyway, it is to a certain degree strained. I think it should be even more strained if Maliki wants to show the Iraqi public that he actually cares about the Iraqi population more than he cares for the Americans. It is the one which gets people angry. It's not only the terrorists or the criminals. Any Iraqi patriot ought to feel very bad that the Americans are killing Iraqis. The Iraqi government is doing nothing about it. The American government is doing nothing about it. And this is really, it shows the low morality of the whole exercise on both sides of the fence. Those are innocent people. No one should get away with murder. This is savagery. It is not a rule of law by the USA. I think the relations between Iraq and the USA will continue as it is because there is a common interest between the regime in Baghdad and the US government, although I think at the end of the day, the government in Baghdad will go for the Iranian side rather than the American side when push comes to shove.
Okay, Mr. alDabbagh in Baghdad, we're coming to the end of our programme. I just want to give you the final question, really, about how much pressure the Prime Minister is. We're hearing from his spokespeople in the government. We're not hearing what he has to say about this. How much pressure or how important is it for him to act and act decisively so that he doesn't lose support back at home?
Well, really, here we are blaming the Prime Minister and blaming the Iraqi government that the whole 2 years they didn't send a lawyer or send somebody to represent Iraqi victims. And the people now is discovering that the government is didn't do this action 2 years. And all of a sudden, they said, we will follow up the case and we will put more attention to the case. So it is now here a joke that as if the Prime Minister and the Iraqi government were sleeping 2 years and now they awakened in order to defend Iraqi citizens. So this point really is so critical and put the Maliki and his government under a critical situation, and the opposition against them will be so severe. So his relations with the United States will be a challenge. And as the Americans apparently they want to support him, there will be no chance to accept this. And yes, Al-Maliki might change his pointer and go to other side, which disturb the situation more, because you know, the American side has two points in this time, but quickly, yes, the Al-Fakka invasion by Iranian force and the cold reaction from the American side, and this action, the 7 days after, that the American justice is not justice and it is not wise with Iraqis. This will create a double pressure on Al-Maliki government and put it in a critical situation.
Well, we should see what the fallout of this situation is as the Iraqi general election looms ever nearer in March. To my guests in Baghdad, London and Doha, thank you very much, gentlemen, for joining us on this edition of Inside Story. And thank you for watching this edition of The Programme. We do welcome your comments and suggestions, and please do email them to us at insidestory@aljazeera.net. I'm Sahil Rahman. Thanks very much for your time and your company.